Oh, hi. Welcome. I didn't see you come in. Your week 5, part 2 of English 2332. I want to talk to you about your second response paper. The assignment sheet has been posted. It's under the research writing module, and it's very similar to the first one. The only real difference, of course, is the source material. You have your choice of 3 now, and it's a little bit broader, which means you're going to need to do a little bit better job of narrowing the focus. Let me read to you the first part of the assignment sheet. It says, a response paper is your chance to communicate in writing your personal viewpoint and personal learning as they relate specifically to the book, essay, paper, etc. A response paper is intended to be a transformative experience, and that comes from Sonoma University out in California. So, yeah, it's meant to, as you work on the paper, as you do the foundational research, and as you write the paper, it's meant to change your understanding, to change, in essence, a part of who you are. So, the 3 sources you get to choose from, you're going to pick either Sappho or poetry. And really, of course, we had this debate earlier, but in my mind, there's really not enough of her poetry to focus on. So I would look at her life if I wanted to do that one. Or you could look at Oedipus the King. Now, there's a lot there. We'll talk about him. Or the Parable of the Cave. A lot there also. Sappho is pretty straightforward. A lot of her novelty is in her newness. She is the earliest major female poet that we know of. She's the first one to focus almost entirely upon physical love and same sex love. And we get the name lesbian from the island Lesbos, where she grew up. But of course, remember that name wasn't applied until only about 150 years ago. So she was certainly never called a lesbian during her lifetime. But anyway, if you want to focus on her, I would focus on why she chose the topics she did and why how she was able to write the way she was able to, how she was able to create this beautiful poetry. And her poetry really is beautiful. You'll often hear me question it, but there's no doubt that it is excellent poetry. Suppose you decide to write about Oedipus the King. That's what we're reading for this week and next as part of the course, and that's just a fascinating play, one of the greatest plays I've ever written, if not the greatest play. And that's really saying something when you think about all the plays that have been written, and you read some of the great works of Shakespeare and some of his other contemporaries, some of the modern poets, and to go all the way back to ancient Greece and say, no, this first one is really, really great. Of course, to sustain that argument, you would have to be familiar with the Greek unities, unity of time, of place, of action, and then show how this fulfills those, which it does. I mean, it does meet those unities. Those are the rules for judging great drama. But if I were writing about Oedipus the King, Oedipus Rex, I would probably write about the theme of fate versus free will. And you're welcome to use this if you want to, if you agree with it. My personal thesis, my idea, my interpretation is that the guy was just out of luck. He just had no hope. It seems to me like he did everything he could to avoid fulfilling the prophecy once he heard about it. And he didn't hear about it until he's a grown man, but he's at a tavern or meets a traveler, and he hears about this prophecy, and so he takes all the steps that he knows to do to avoid fulfilling the prophecy. And Apollo, or the prophecy itself, just seems to have it out for him. Of course, you'd be arguing fate, that fate determines our destinies, that we have no choice, that Oedipus, no matter what he did, whether he did everything or absolutely nothing, things would have turned out exactly the same. You can also look at, the use of prophecy. You could talk about taboos in the play. There's just lots. Use of the chorus in the play. There's just lots there to deal with. If you have trouble, let me know. In fact, I may post a thing later this week that gives you 3 or 4 or 5 suggested focus points. Parable of the Cave, our old friend Plato. He wrote this as a metaphor, an extended metaphor, and it's also filled with little metaphors too along the way, but as a way of explaining his concept of philosophy, specifically enlightenment, specifically the necessity of leaders who have been enlightened and their need, their responsibility to lead others to enlightenment. You got a bunch of people who are trapped down. Now, this is written in the form of a dialogue, of course, and you've got the two guys talking to each other, although really it's just one guy doing most of the talking. But you got a bunch of people trapped down in a cave. They're chained. They can only see the shadows on the wall. What happens if one guy gets free and he manages to painfully escape up into the light, and it's very painful light, and he has to suffer, but finally he sees the light, enlightenment. He attains philosophical self-awareness. What would happen if he went back down into the cave and tried to bring others up with him? Surely they would kill him. If I were doing that one, I would, I'm not sure I would do that one. That was a pretty tough one. But I would probably do enlightenment, political and philosophical enlightenment as a form of knowledge, or just some of the symbolism and metaphors in the short story. And it is a short story. It's actually a chapter out of a book called The Republic. If you look at the assignment sheet, you'll notice that I have formatted those correctly for you. The Parable of the Cave is in quotation marks because short stories and chapters of the book go in quotation marks according to MLA. Oedipus the King is in italics because plays always go in italics. And Sappho is just a proper noun, so it's just capitalized and that's it. But if I were doing Parable of the Cave, yeah, I'd probably do some of the metaphors, and not all of them, gosh, there's way too many, but focus on maybe 3, have 1 per paragraph and say, this metaphor represents this, and then because, and explain why. Again, you don't want to retell the story, and I know there's a real temptation to just say, well, this is what happened. I know what happened. You don't have to tell me what happened. What I'm looking for is what you think is the cause, what you think is the reason why, how you think this is going to affect the reader, or why the author didn't do it some other way. You can use deconstruction as part of your writing if you want to. If I were doing Sappho, you could use historical criticism and say, suppose Sappho had been born in 21st century America, or 18th century England, or 5th century Italy. That would be interesting. Okay. Anyway, read through the assignment sheet carefully. Go ahead and pick one of those 3 things and get started, if nothing else, by reading the source material that you're going to write about. I know what you're thinking. It's not due to Sunday, March the 20th, and that's a long way away. It's actually the Sunday after spring break. And I know it seems like a long way away, but it'll be here before you know it. My best advice, go ahead and get started now. Let me know when you have questions. Good luck.